I want to share something that genuinely caught my attention. If you've ever picked up your phone to start a timer and ended up distracted instead, you'll get why Focusor stands out. Focusor is a physical focus companion that helps you start without opening another app. You twist and click to begin, and in deep focus mode, it creates a real pause between you and your phone. So just one quick check is easier to stop before it turns into a spiral. And when you finish a session, you get a visual reward that makes consistency feel encouraging instead of punishing. If that sounds more doable than trying to out-willpower your phone, it's on Kickstarter right now. Tap the link in the show notes to back Focusor in the early bird price and be among the first to get one.
Quick wins for ADHD moms. It's the little things that keep us going. Wins for ADHD moms.
This is Quick Wins for ADHD Moms. If you're a mom with ADHD, with probably ADHD kids, you're probably smart, capable, and completely overwhelmed anyway. Well, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jessica Lynn Lewis. More at theadhdmom.com. Now let's get into the show. Well, today's guest is Dr. Jennie Byrne. She's a board-certified psychiatrist and neuroscientist who helps high-achieving professionals understand and work with their ADHD brains. Today, we're talking about what is actually different in the ADHD brain, why so many women hold it together at work and fall apart at home, and what real support can look like. If you've ever wondered whether you're too high-functioning to have ADHD, this conversation is for you. Well, Dr. Jennie, thank you so much for being on Quick Wins for ADHD Moms. We appreciate you being here.
Great to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I was looking at your website and you have a new book coming out, and I'm so excited to be able to share the information here because it's not a topic that is really talked about a lot, and you have extensive background and knowledge in all of this. And so I'm excited about our conversation today. So we always start our show with a quick win, and I'd love to hear your quick win for the ADHD mom.
Yeah, one thing I've seen a lot is as a mom, I'm a mom, we do anything for our kids. So especially if you have an ADHD kid, you probably have done a lot of stuff for them. Time, money, effort, emotional. And I see that sometimes the moms have trouble taking care of their own ADHD or taking care of themselves. And one really helpful way to motivate that is to think about being a better parent. And I guarantee if you take care of yourself and you manage your own ADHD, you're going to be a better parent. And if you don't, the reality is you're probably not going to be as good of a parent as you want to be.
Yeah, because when you're running on empty, you're teaching your kids. What are you teaching your kids, right?
Yep,
And
exactly.
you work with a lot of ADHD moms and professionals. And so your new book, tell us about your new book.
Yeah, the new book is called ADHD in Professionals, Embracing Your Brain. And as you can tell by the title, I do take a strength-based approach. I know that's a little controversial, and there's kind of a history behind all of that. But I wanted to talk about what it looks like for high-achieving professionals, pre-professionals, people out there who really the conversation around ADHD tends to miss. And they've probably been told things like, you're too high functioning to have
Mm-hmm.
ADHD. Well,
Yep.
you're a doctor. You can't have ADHD. You never would have made it through medical school.
Mm-hmm.
These are the refrains that people hear over and over and over. And it's been very discouraging for me. I've been doing this for decades to see that there is so much misinformation still out there, even amongst my fellow clinicians and mental health
Mm-hmm.
providers that I really respect. For some reason, when it comes to ADHD, even they don't really know, and they sometimes will actually give out misinformation. And so, part for me, the motivation to write the book and get it out into the world was to make sure that there was really high quality information available for people who are that kind of quote unquote high achieving person with
Mm-hmm.
ADHD.
Yeah, I personally had a struggle with my own story, not realizing I had ADHD until my son did. And then going to a doctor, and he was basically wrote me off and was like,
Mm.
there's other people who are worse off than you who need help. So I guess I don't deserve help.
I'm so
you
sorry that
know?
happened to you. I wish it didn't. And I just hear that over and over and over from so many folks that I work with. So I'm sorry that happened to you too.
Yeah, and it's o I have an amazing psychiatrist now.
Mm.
She's wonderful, but you almost have to fight for it to get where you know you need to go, but you don't know where to go because it's such an I wouldn't say this is a new thing, but maybe newer in the professional environment.
I think part of the reason there's so much misinformation out there is an interest in ADHD.
Oh, yeah,
And people are noticing their attention and the challenges, and they don't know if it's ADHD versus some other issue. And so
right.
there is a lot of interest in the topic, which is positive, but unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of confusion. So, getting finding the right person, you mentioned you found the right person,
Yep,
is really critical. And that's regardless of whether you choose medicine or not. I'm always
absolutely.
very clear that, like, getting assessed is about understanding yourself, your brain, your body. It
Yep,
is not about forcing you or telling you not to take medicine. Medicine is one tool in the toolbox.
yes,
So sometimes finding the right person is hard for ADHD just because right now, unfortunately, not a lot of people are well trained. So, for example, as a physician, as a psychiatrist, you'd think I got a
mhm,
lot of training on ADHD. I got one lecture that was about 45 minutes long, and it mostly talked about kids. Now, that was
mhm,
a long time ago, but I talk to
sure,
people who are in training now. It's still only about an hour or two of training. So we're not getting it in our school. Really, the only way we're getting it is through lived experience or
okay,
just professional curiosity where we're going out and learning on our own. And that's how I learned about it. Was I just got very curious about it about 20 years ago. Did my PhD on attention, basic science. So I've always been interested in attention, but it wasn't until I was in clinical practice. I live close to the University of North Carolina and I live close to Duke. And I started seeing a lot of professionals with ADHD, and I realized I didn't know as much as I should. So I had to go out and educate myself.
yes, and you come from a neurological and psychiatric background, right? And I was reading you are just you're so fascinated with the brain, and I think that's what made me so curious over the last few years, diving into the neuroscience of what ADHD is. Can you kinda speak into that a little bit?
Sure, I'll just kind of give a high level without nerding out too much. There's a lot of books out there, by the way, if you want to nerd out on neuroscience of ADHD. But basically, the way I see it as a neuroscientist, so I did an MD, PhD. So I have both a medical degree and a PhD, and that was in cognition and attention. So I see ADHD as a brain variant. If you've ever studied medicine, you know that our bodies are filled with variants. We're actually quite different under the surface. And that's good. As a population, you want to have variants because that's diversity in the population makes the population stronger. So we think ADHD is probably 5 to 10% of the adult population in terms of prevalence. And if you look at brains of people with ADHD versus not ADHD brains, you notice a couple things. And you can look at the brain in a bunch of different ways. You can look at the structure of the brain using MRI. You can look at the function of the brain using something called PET imaging. And then you can look at the electrophysiology of the brain using things like EEG, where, you put electrodes all over somebody's head. That's the old fashioned way. So we see a bunch of different things, and these are in the book as well. But in terms of brain structure, we see that the cerebellum, which is the back part of our brain, that's like it's like a little nut kind of back
Mhm.
here. It's an old part of the brain. We used to think about this just in terms of balance and coordination, but now we know it also does cognitive functions. And you see changes in the cerebellum in the ADHD brain. One of the things when you look at the function of the brain is you see decreased ability of our frontal lobe, which is our kind of executive functioning lobe, to feed back into other parts of the brain. And so that kind of correlates to difficulty modulating attention the way you want, saying, like, I'm going to do this thing. So I'm going to put my attention spotlight on it and I'm going to sit here and do this for 6 hours. Because that pathway is different in ADHD, it's more difficult for the person with
Hmm.
ADHD. Another thing you can look at is the electrophysiological signature of the brain. And that looks kind of at the whole brain. And we see some interesting things in something called the default network, which is a connection between different parts of the brain. And we see that in ADHD, it's harder to overcome that mode. So if I'm overgeneralizing, it's kind of like a daydreamy, making connections between different ideas mode, and it's more difficult for ADHD to switch in and out of the default mode.
Okay.
It's a little bit overgeneralizing, but it's
Right, right.
harder to switch gears basically, and it's
Yes.
easier to drift into this creative, daydreamy, connecting different ideas together mode.
And I think that's where the task switching becomes really hard, right? So you're in the middle of a task, and then your child comes up and says, "Mom, can you do this for me really quick?" And you're like, "I'm never going to see this task again. I will go help you," and then come back and and it's hard because my brain is like making all these like floating connections, right? And it's like I just want it to float for a little bit. I don't want to put my attention into something because it takes me out of kind of just a default, the non-default mode, I guess.
Yeah, task shifting is a big one. And even for non ADHD brain, task shifting takes a lot of energy. And so
Yeah.
for non ADHD brains, I like to talk about multitasking is a myth.
Mhm.
Our brain does not multitask, it actually just switches back and forth very rapidly. But you lose a lot of your brain energy when you task shift. So even for the non ADHD brain, if you're doing three things at the same time, you're only getting about 20% efficacy on each of the three things. And you're
Wow.
losing 40% of your brain power just to switching back and forth. So if you have email open, you're listening to
Mhm.
something in the background, and then a kid walks in the room, that's three things. So you've lost 40% of your brain task shifting, and that's non ADHD brain. ADHD brain is even harder to do that and loses even more brain power trying to switch.
So when you work with someone who has ADHD, what does that look like? I mean, I think, I'm not sure. I only know my own brain, but it seems like everyone is different and the pathway for them to becoming a better mom, becoming a better person is very different. So if someone is on that journey, kind of where would you point them?
It's a great question because we don't have a standard way
Mhm.
currently in this country to assess and treat ADHD.
Yes.
So everybody does it a little different, which is very difficult when you're seeking help. Normally, what I recommend, if you have an ADHD specialist that you can get to in your area, that's a great place to start. But they should explicitly say that they're an ADHD specialist. If you can't find somebody or you don't know where to go, sometimes working with an ADHD coach is actually a good starting place because they can direct you to people in their network that are specialists in ADHD. So, what I recommend that you don't do is I wouldn't go to your PCP and expect your
Mhm.
primary care and expect them to have the answers. You might get lucky and have a great primary care who happens to know about ADHD, or maybe they have lived experience and maybe you get lucky, but most primary care really don't know what to do. So that's
Mhm.
actually not the best starting place. So you could ask your primary care, hey, tell me about your experience in ADHD. What's your comfort level, your experience? And if they say, oh, I know a ton about it, blah, 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 maybe that is a good place to start, but most of the time they're going to say no. And I wouldn't just go to any old psychiatrist. I wouldn't go to any old psychotherapist. I would really focus on people with expertise um, that they explicitly say they have expertise in ADHD.
Yeah, I think that was part of my past story too, is just going to a PCP and he had no idea what was going on. He was trying to think, well, I think you're just bipolar maybe, or, like he was trying to lead into something else. I was like, I know what that's, no, no. Yeah, and it's that fight and it's very disconnected, right? So I went and got an assessment and the assessment, like they don't do they're just like, yes, you have it. Good luck with that. So it's a very
Yeah,
disconnected process.
It is, and there are people out there like me who are advising companies about how to make this better for people in general. The way I practice, which I think works really well. I know it's not the norm out there, but when folks come into me for an assessment, I do a three-part assessment, and I think if you do these three components, you can feel pretty confident about your diagnosis. The first part is what most people do, which is the clinical interview. And
Hmm.
basically, what you're doing is getting to know the person and hear about their history, what's happening now. You're thinking about other things that can cause attention problems like sleep,
Brain
depression,
injury.
anxiety, brain things, medical conditions, medicines that you're taking, the way you're using technology, etc.
Hmm.
So that's what most people do. So that's one component. The second component I like to do is a standardized executive function rating scale. There's a couple out there. The one I like is called the Barkley, and it just asks about your actual real world experiences. So you mentioned a kid walks in the room and, game over, you're moving on. It asks these very day to day questions about your functioning, and it asks somebody who knows you well to rate you as well. So that type of standardized age and gender executive functioning scale really talks about like how are you doing real world. Yeah, you're a professional. On paper, everything looks great.
Hmm.
But under the surface, what are you doing to try to keep everything going? Um, there's one more component I use that not everybody uses. I like to use a computerized test of attention that's standardized, again, that's age and gender normed. And there's a couple reasons I like to use it. First of all, in psychiatry, we don't have a ton of science. So
Hmm.
when we do have science, I think we should take advantage of it.
Hmm.
The second thing is it really helps me get a baseline. You know, is your ADHD brain like off the chart or is it mild? Because that'll tell me how much medication could or could not help. If you're someone who's like way off the chart, it's going to be hard for you to do coaching and therapy and other stuff when your symptoms are so out of control. So, medicine may be more helpful for you to bring your symptoms into the normal range
Right.
so that then you can go ahead and do the work with the coaches and the others. So those are the three pieces. If I have 3 out of 3, I'm very confident in the diagnosis. If I have 2 out of 3, I'm, pretty comfortable. If I only have 1 out of 3 though, I normally say we need to look deeper. I think something else might be going in here. And that's where we need to go and pursue other things.
Yeah. No, it's a great, wonderful documented process that you can go through. And I was on your website looking at you have a new diagnostic process that you've been using. I'm assuming that's what you just talked about.
Yeah, so the ones I
It was like
use,
the
and
My Q.
there are a couple out there. I like to use a test called the QB Tech.
That's what
It's
you
a
mentioned. Yes.
company, European company. They've been doing this for decades. Tons of literature and evidence for what they do. It's a 20-minute test that you can take at home. It is painful. It is very painful to take. It's very boring, but it's supposed to be, and that's how we get really good data. The other test I sometimes use for computer testing is something called Krios, which used to be called Cambridge Brain Science, I think. And it looks at a smattering of neuropsychological things. So, not just attention, but like memory, spatial planning. And it can be done very quickly at home. I'm wondering, I don't know what you did. The traditional way to do this is a pen and paper, sit down with a psychologist for like hours at a time. That's the
Okay. We
traditional. This is
started
kind
with
of,
that, an interview, what was your childhood look like?
yeah.
And so I was making the connections. And then I did the Brown scale was
Yeah,
one of
there's a
them.
bunch of
So
different standardized rating scales. I don't think you have to
I
use
don't
one or the other. I like the executive functioning because, again, the folks I work with, the professionals, I really want to know, like day to day, what are the tasks that you're struggling with? Because clearly you're working and you're doing okay, but like I need to know really, like in detail, where are things falling down? Because
yeah.
it's often at home. It's not at work.
Interesting. Really?
Yeah.
Why is that? Or
There's
how
a
is that?
couple reasons. First of all, a lot of treatment for ADHD tends to focus heavily on work and school and task completion. But there's also a big piece of emotional dysregulation or emotional reactivity that most people with ADHD have. And that doesn't come out at work as much. But when they go home and they've used all their energy to
Hmm.
kind of mask or hold it together or cope at work, you come home and it's just like,
You're in
you're
your safe
exhausted. It
space.
falls.
Hmm.
Yes. Just like a kid.
Yeah,
When a kid is
just like a kid.
exhausted from school, they melt down when they come home. And the other thing is sometimes people's medicines aren't optimized. And so they're taking stimulant meds to focus on work. And then those meds are wearing off and crashing at exactly the time they're coming home for the like
Need it.
evening family marathon time of like, I got to get dinner and the homework and the papers and the
And then
bedtime and the
sports,
bath
right?
and the sports and so if your medicine is wearing off exactly at the time when you're heading into your evening marathon, that can be really disastrous. And so sometimes there is
Really.
a medication piece where they're really not optimized.
Yeah, yeah. So what do someone who doesn't look like they struggle, but inside, like they're on this repeat burnout cycle that I think a lot of us don't realize that we go into this burnout cycle. We're just like, oh, I mean, it's just my period or whatever. You know, how, where do you start with them as far as, telling them to do less? Figure out where all that energy is going and shifting environment. I know
Great
environment
question.
has a lot.
Again, because I kind of do both medication and the coaching part together, again, I'll look at like if your symptoms are just off the chart, you know, you may be wasting your time trying to work on your environment. So you may need
Oh, yeah.
medicine to help pull your symptoms to a place where you can do the other things. But if you're if you're running in circles and it's really bad and your symptoms are really high, like you're just going to burn yourself out more. And that's where, again, sometimes medicine is really helpful or optimizing what you take. But normally, what I try to do is if I start working more in the coaching mode, so if their symptoms are, controllable enough,
Manageable. Yeah.
yeah, then we try to say like, let's pick one or two things that are really big pain points and let's
Mhm.
really go into detail. So, for example, I had a mom with ADHD, a couple kids, did wonderfully at work, came home and fell apart, was having crying spurts like a couple times a week, felt really terrible. So we were like, okay, let's not talk about work. Let's focus at like what's happening when you're having these meltdowns. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What is happening in your environment? Like, and we kind of go real deep into it to figure out what's the core problem. So we did this for her. And what turned out was the core problem was she was making dinner and people were complaining about dinner. And that was triggering a bunch of stuff from her childhood as well as rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And she was melting down. So for her, the next step was to really look at the dinner routine. And she decided to stop making dinners as part. She was spending 2 hours a night making dinner. She
Yeah.
decided to pre-order like meals that could be put together in like 15 minutes and it changed her life. But she was still having some meltdowns. So we kept going, well, okay, what's going on? That's where we discovered, oh, people are complaining. And so she sat down with her husband and her kids and said, look, when you guys complain about dinner, this is making me feel really bad. And I need you to not make complaints about dinner. If you don't like the dinner I put in front of you, you can go in the kitchen and make a sandwich. I'm okay with that. But I don't want to hear complaints. And they were great. They stopped complaining and that really started to turn things around. So, just an example of like you really have to keep asking questions like, well, what is it? What is it? What is it? And then you have to experiment and try some different things to see what's going to bring you that relief. But that was huge for her. I mean, the idea that she didn't have to spend 2 hours making dinner and listen to complaining every night was a huge step forward, really opened up for other things.
Yeah. And I love that it starts with curiosity. Like, okay, what is really going on here? Instead of, I don't know, maybe I need a 2-week vacation in
Well,
Florida.
she was thinking about leaving her job
Oh,
because she's like,
yeah.
I love my job. I do great at my job. I'm
But that
valued at my
wasn't the
job. I have
problem.
meaning in my job, but I don't know what to do. And so she almost left her job, which
Yeah.
would have made everything worse.
Which I think that goes into the overthinking, right? Like, how do you process all of this and overthinking, and you're putting all of the dots together, but the dots don't make sense,
Mm.
even though you're trying to connect them. You don't know what to connect them with. And so I love that part of the coaching that helps you kind of ground that.
Yeah, and just to validate for people who may be listening, like, you can't shrink yourself. Like, I can't shrink myself. You need that external, neutral, curious, kind person sometimes to reflect back to you what's going
Yeah.
on. Like, I can't do this for myself. And we haven't talked yet. I do not have ADHD, full disclosure, but I have a kid who's a neurodiverse kid, and I couldn't shrink that situation. I needed to go get help from other people to figure out how to be a better parent because even though this is my job and this is what I do, like, it doesn't work to do it to yourself sometimes. You really
Yeah,
need
I agree.
that outside person to guide you. And so sometimes asking for help is also just really hard.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too with my 2 boys, and, like, there's constant fighting, and there's only so much you can do as a parent and still be a good parent without becoming a yeller and screamer, and then, it's not worth it. So asking for help is huge, and it's not something we're really good at because we just learn to do everything ourselves because we've had to, and we figure it out because we're smart, but you just get to a point where you're like, "I just can't figure it out anymore."
Yeah, and again, just to validate it, it was hard for me to ask for help, and we talked a little bit about strength based, looking at ADHD, but there is this flip side, and when you have a kid, you often have to figure out, I don't really want my kid to be labeled as disabled. Like, I have this
Right.
kid, he's great, he's super smart, all these good things, but like this isn't like a disabled kid. But at the same time, I had to switch gears and get help and figure out what my kid needed to thrive. And sometimes that does mean having a diagnosis. Sometimes it means a 504, but again, as parents, a lot of people have trouble doing this for themselves. It's easy when it's your kid because you care so much and you're willing, but when you look at yourself, well, you need help. You might need accommodations in your workplace. You might need accommodations at home. You might need all the same things your kid needs, but it's just so much harder, as an adult to spend the time and money on yourself than you would for your kid.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're trying to figure out your kid, but you keep forgetting to make that phone call to the person who could be helpful, and then you second guess, well, maybe that's really not helpful, and, oh, well, the school year's almost over, and then you just find yourself in this loop later, so, yeah.
Yeah, there's one great resource if folks are listening and they would like to look at something without having to remember to put a phone call. Dr. Narissa Bauer is a pediatric specialist in Indiana, and she has turned her specialty to ADHD because she has ADHD. Her kids have ADHD. And she has a program for parents and families that's really wonderful. So if you check her out,
I
it's
will.
called Teach Me ADHD is her program for families. And her name is Dr. Narissa Bauer. And she's wonderful. So you could check out her resources. She does a lot of podcasts that are really good too.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, it's great having all those connections too, 'cause, I'm trying to figure out how do we have support at school, and what does that look like? And teachers are like, "I mean, I don't get the ADHD thing, but we'll help. I just don't know how to help." And I was like, "I don't
Right.
know either." So it's nice that
Yeah,
there's
my
programs.
my kid, the story one of the stories with my kid was, and I don't know if my kids go to public school, and they had a new policy about going to the bathroom and standing up and leaving the classroom where you had to like go to the teacher and ask permission and the teacher put it in the computer. Anyway, it was like this whole thing. And so of course like my kid didn't want to do that,
So you just
but they
hold
were
it.
but they're and it wasn't even sometimes they just needed to physically get up and move, but they were like
Yeah.
so anxious to go make the request, they wouldn't do it. And so they were just like sitting there in torture. And so
Mhm.
that was a good example of something very simple. Accommodation was, hey, if my kid just raises their hand, they're going to go out and the teacher will just log it as a bathroom. And that was it.
Yes, simplify it, right.
Simple, right? But it took a as you know, as a parent, like that took a big process. And if we had not had a diagnosis and a 504, like we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right, exactly. So could probably keep talking to you for hours because I love your brain and I love how it works, and I'm really excited about your new book coming out because I think, again, it hits a really specific audience that many of us moms find ourselves in, this high-functioning ADHD mom masking for years, and underneath where we just need help. So, and I love your book
Yeah,
helps with things like that.
I hope people will enjoy the book. The idea was to do a little less of the science. So I have some science in there, but a little bit more of the narrative of real people and real stories. And hopefully, you can see yourself in one of these
Mhm.
stories or a couple of these stories. The main message, is you're not alone. 5
Mm.
to 10% of the population is a lot of people. If you have a
Mhm.
room of 100 people, it's 5 to 10 people just like you in there, even though you may not know it. So if you're a professional and you're at work, odds are there are a bunch of people in your workplace that have ADHD. So you're not alone, is the first thing. Second thing is, even though it's a little confusing, there is good help out there. A lot of people out here would love to help you. There is good information. It is not all about medicine, although medicine is important as a tool in the toolkit. There's some really cool things coming. And so, um, just a sneak peek, but like there's tools that are not medicine that work with your neurophysiology.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah, there's actually, you have these kind of big headsets on. There's headsets coming that can measure your EEG. So while you have a headset on, you're getting an EEG of how your brain is working, and you may be able to learn how to enhance attention and focus of your brain in real time. So I'm very excited about tools like that that aren't just, pills. There's a lot of other things too.
Have you heard of Mendy? It's like an app, like the Mendy app.
I have heard of it. I
It's
haven't really had anyone try it. Have you?
Yeah, we have it, but it takes me to sit down and put it on, and, like, you do this game, and it's like a neurofeedback, and I'm like, I don't I need to do it more, but there's no reward for it, like, no
Yeah.
immediate reward, and so I'm having a hard I think it does help, and I have heard neurofeedback is really helpful. But again, this is one of those things where, like, I don't know, like, you post it on a Facebook message board or whatever, group, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Well, it worked for me," and, "No, it doesn't work for me," and you just hear
Yeah.
all of these opinions and
I think it's a nice option, and people who like video games, probably it is rewarding because they like playing video games, and people who don't like video games probably don't like it. Is my guess. So
yeah,
it's again, it's like you said, it's very individual. What's going to give you dopamine hits and make things attractive
yeah,
um, to do. But some of the interventions are very common sense, honestly. Like um, sleep is a big one. Like really
yeah,
mastering your sleep routine. But there's a lot of parts to a sleep routine,
mhm,
right? Like it's actually a fairly complicated set of things. But if you master your sleep, that can be extraordinarily helpful. And then, you know, this little
yep,
thing,
mhm,
um, you do control this. You may not think you do, but you do control your relationship with technology, and it can be used in a way that's helpful, not harmful. But companies spend billions of dollars making that little thing addictive.
addictive,
So it's not you. They are using money and all the science out there about your brain to make you pick it up. So you really have to be intentional about it. But there are things
mm,
you can do, and you can control that thing. It may
mhm,
not feel like it, but you can.
I love that, that's great advice. It's so simple too, right? Like you said, there's a very accessible things that you can do right now to help.
And I think and I talk about this a little bit in the book, not a ton, but especially for moms out there. We live in a cultural context, and you don't want to underestimate the power of the culture you live in. So when I talked about the mom making dinner, we still live in a culture where most moms make dinner.
Mhm,
I personally do not make dinner. I have never made dinner. I am not even allowed in my kitchen. And, I have fought a cultural battle against that since I was little. So that's one. But being busy is another cultural context we're in. Most people are rewarded for saying they're busy. I'm busy, crazy, busy, 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 busy. But that is just a cultural context
the
that
hustle
is
culture.
relatively new. If you go back to the 1800s, if you were a successful person, you were not busy, you were leisurely. That was the goal. That was the cultural context at that time.
Let's go back to
So,
that.
yeah.
Put me in my garden and I'll just sit in my
Yeah.
garden, watch things grow. Yeah.
So we're in a culture. And so sometimes understanding that what you feel is very emotional, but it's also because the culture is like putting it on you.
Mhm.
And you can, again, it's not easy, but you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Like,
I
you
like
really
that.
don't.
I
You don't.
love that. Yes. My dad always called me Contra because he
Oh, yeah. Why?
never did anything that, they're like, do this. And I did the opposite. So yeah, I would love to do the opposite of what culture is expected of us.
Yeah. One little challenge I throw out there to people, you guys can try it, anyone listening. Um, Next time somebody asks how you're doing, don't use the word busy. You're not allowed to use the word busy. Try it for a week. Watch how people react to you.
Mm.
It's very fascinating. And watch
Yeah.
how you feel.
I already feel rejected. Like, oh, I'm not doing anything.
Well, people say, "Oh, you're, Dr. B, Dr. Jenny, you're so busy. You're doing so many things." And I say this with full honesty. I am not busy. My life is full
Mhm.
by choice. I'm actually not busy. There are people legit busy out there working 2, 3 jobs to put food on the table. Those people are busy. I am not that person. My life is full and I choose to make it that way. But when I say that to people, I get a very interesting reaction.
And how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel um like I own it. Like, this is my life. I'm going to live it the way I want. And if I make my life full, that's my choice. And if I don't want it to be full, that's my
Oh,
choice too.
I
You may
love
be feeling busy, but I actually don't feel busy because I feel like it's a choice. And again, there are people out there who don't have a choice. And I feel like it's kind of disrespectful to them for me to say, oh, I'm busy, busy, busy. No, this is my choice. The person out there working 3 jobs to put food on the table, like, they don't have a choice. They're busy,
Yeah.
right? They can say they're busy and it's true. So it's a little that's kind of the way I look at it.
Mhm. I think you mentioned before, though, the word intention. And you have choices and intention. And how are you using your time? How do you choose to use your time?
Yeah,
And
exactly. And it is a choice. It may not always feel like a choice because of cultural constraints or because the way your brain is telling you to do something, but you really do. Again, not everybody, but a lot of people really do have these choices. And another one
yeah,
would be, I will tell people, like, if watching the news is bad for your mental health, then just don't watch
right?
it.
Yeah,
Just don't watch it. It's
y-
really, again, like,
right.
my spouse watches the news sometimes, and I'm like, you know what? If I need to know something, tell me.
So that's
And
a
it's not
wonderful.
good for my mental health, so I just don't do it. And he'll tell me. If it's something I need to know, he'll tell me.
You not watching the news is not going to change anything that's going on. So your mental health might as well be happy and
I mean, if there's a hurricane coming tomorrow and you need to get ready, yeah, sure, you need to
sure.
know that. But find someone in your life who can tell you the hurricane's coming
Yeah,
and they'll tell you.
right. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. There's so much good information here. Your new book is coming out. I'm already starting to read through the advanced copy, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's wonderful. So, again,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Dr. B, for being with us today. If someone wanted to reach out to you or find you online, where can they find you?
If somebody wants to passively just check out my content and see what's going on, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on YouTube. That's the best place to check it out. If somebody would like to actively reach out to me, the website is constellationpllc.com. And I'm licensed in, I think, 24 states right now. So I can do ADHD assessments in most states. I can do coaching anywhere. And if you forget the website and you remember my name, just go to LinkedIn and find me and send me a message there.
And we'll put links in the show notes too, so it's easy to find as well. Well, I appreciate you and I appreciate your story and your time. And I love what you're doing, and I will continue to follow.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Just embrace one thing today that really stood out to you. Just one quick win. That's the whole idea. Small shifts, real relief built for the way your brain actually works. Grab the free resources at theadhdmom.com. And if this episode was really useful or helpful to you, share it with someone who could really use a win today. Have a beautiful week. We'll see you next time.